Yesterday we looked at the distance formula. So we looked at the distance between 2 points. For today, we're going to look at 2 points and find the midpoints of those 2 points. Using this midpoint formula here. So I have 2 coordinates, x and a y. I'm going to take my 2 x values, add them together, divide by 2. I'm going to take my 2 y values, add them together, and divide by 2. What does this kind of look like? Taking 2 numbers, add them to divide by 2. Average, right? You're taking the average of your x value and the average of your y value, and that is going to be your midpoint. So since you're dual credit and you have to memorize formulas, to memorize the midpoint, just think if you're taking the average of your x and your y. Let's look at a couple examples. So I have 7, 4, and 9 minus 1. I want to find the midpoint between those 2 points. First, let's look at the x values here. I see that my midpoint for my x, mx, equals x2 plus x1, so 7 plus 9, divided by 2. Which gives me 7 plus 9 is 16 over 2. So my x value for my midpoint is 8.
Yeah. Wow, quick math.
Now, let's find the midpoint of my y. So I have 4 and negative 1. And my y is 4 plus minus 1 over 2. Which comes out to be 3 over 2. And we could go ahead and just keep that as a fraction, 3 over 2.
Yeah.
So what is the midpoint between 7, 4 and 9, negative 1? Well, that is 8 and 3 halves. That is my midpoint.
Wow.
Wow. Now using this formula, let me give you a moment to find the midpoint between 8, negative 9, and 0, 5. Let's find the midpoint of 8, negative 9, and 0, 5. First, let me find the midpoint with my x value here, 8 and 0. So m of x equals 8 plus 0 divided by 2, which equals 8 over 2. So the x value of my midpoint is 4. Next, let me find the midpoint of my y, negative 9 and 5. So negative 9 plus 5 over 2, which gives me negative 4 over 2. So the midpoint of my y value here is a negative 2. So what is the midpoint between 8, negative 9, and 0, 5? That is 4, negative 2. Is that what we got? 4, negative 2? Okay. So pretty easy to find the midpoint, right? Gets a little bit more difficult if we were to, well, let's say we have the midpoint. We also have an endpoint. And now it's your turn, your goal to find the other endpoint. So what I mean is, we have 2 points. The last slide we looked at the endpoint, the midpoint, using the midpoint formula. Now we have a point. We have the midpoint, and we need to find the other endpoint. So we're looking for that value there. That's what we're going to be doing with these problems. So let's see. Endpoint is negative 9, negative 1. The midpoint is 8, 14. I do have the formula, so let me go ahead and just plug it to the formula and see what happens. So I know my m of x is this part right here. I know what my midpoint for the x value is, right? That is 8. So this equals 8. I know one of my x values, that is negative 9, so negative 9. I'm going to add that to my other x value, which I do not know. So I'm going to just call that x. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And that is divided by 2. So plugging it into our midpoint formula, we get this. Where my goal here is to solve for x. So what should I do to solve for x? Multiply by 2. So the opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2.
Why does your screen look so dark?
I don't know. That gives me 16 equals negative 9 plus x. And now last but not least, add 9.
Yeah.
So I at least know that my x value is 25.
5. And this formula we have to memorize as well?
Yes. Now let's try to find my,
It's always going to be divided by 2?
yes,
Why?
because, well, the midpoint, you have a line, and the midpoint is cut in half, right?
Yes.
So that's why we're dividing by 2. It's half of our line. So let's see here. Let's do the same thing, but try to find the y. So I have my m of y, that is 14. So my midpoint value is 14 for the y. I'm adding my y values, but I only know one of them, and that is a negative 1. So negative 1 plus some y divided by 2. So in this case, we solve for y. So once again, let's multiply by 2 on both sides. That gives me 28 equals negative 1 plus y. And last but not least, add 1. And I see that y equals 29. So what is the point of the other endpoint? That is 25, 29. If I take that point and I take this endpoint, its midpoint will be 8, 14.
Wow.
So it's basically plugging into the formula and solving for the missing variable. So go ahead and work number 22. Find the other endpoint. All right, let's solve. So m of x equals x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So my m value here, my x value would be a 6. So 6 equals, grabbing my x value for the other endpoint, 10 plus x over 2. So let me multiply by 2. That's 12 equals 10 plus x. Therefore, x equals 2.
Yay, did that part right.
Nice.
Thanks.
So x equals 2. Now this other one is m of y equals y1 plus y2 over 2. Where my m of y value here is 9. And then I have my other y value that I know is 12. And the other one I don't know, so I'll call it y. All over 2. Multiply across is 18 equals 12 plus y. And then subtracting 12, did you get 6 for the y?
What did I get?
Hope so.
Oh, okay.
Therefore, the other endpoint is at coordinates 2,
Yay.
6. 2, 6 is my other endpoint.
Easy now. Oh, nope. Good job.
Now note, the process stayed the same, right? We had to multiply by 2, then we subtracted by the other point, multiply by 2, subtracted the other point, multiply by 2, subtract the other point. So if you were to take the midpoint formula, you can rewrite it in terms of the other point. So I know here, I want to solve for x1 or x2, it doesn't matter. Multiply by 2, so that's going to be 2 m to the x equals x2 plus x1. And then subtract one of these x's. So I know to find the x value, the unknown endpoint, I need to multiply my midpoint x value times 2, and then subtract the known endpoint.
So we can use that formula?
You can use this formula if you choose. So basically it's multiplying my midpoint, so 6 times 2 is 12, subtracting 10, 2. Multiply 9 times 2 is 18, subtract 12, 6. Works the same way. So this could be either x, or you can rewrite this in terms of y.
You can turn off our camera because you